Just want to give everyone who has recently applied to our free Facebook community a quick update. We are behind on processing your applications. So thank you for your patience. We will get to them as soon as we can. We just want you to know that we haven't forgotten about you. Thanks again. ADHD rewired, episode 410. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHD-rewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We are here for our last live monthly Q&A for 2021. For those of you who are listening to this on the podcast, I hope you had a happy new year. Let me just quickly introduce everyone here. Eric Tivers, I am the host. In the top left corner, we have Barb McDonough, our community manager, my assistant. And thank you, Barb, for being here. She's going to help screen our questions. How are you, Barb?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. And we have in my other corner, Will Kerb, the host of Hacking Your ADHD.
Howdy, howdy.
And just so everyone knows, he is sporting a fantastic, ugly Christmas sweater. What is even on that? It's candy canes and a dinosaur in a Christmas hat. That's amazing. Thank you, Will. All right. And then we have MJ Siemens, the host of ADHD Diversified. Hey, MJ.
Hi.
Are you sporting an ugly sweater?
I am. Nah.
All right.
Cats and lasers.
Cat with laser eyes. That's amazing. Wow.
I finally remembered.
And we have Moira Maven, the host of the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle, who told us before we hit record that she's sporting a fresh shower and clean clothes.
Yep. Checking those boxes off this morning.
How you doing, Moira?
I'm good.
And we have Brendan Mahan, the host of ADHD Essentials.
Hi, everybody.
Who's just sporting a smile. That looks great.
Yeah, that's because I have SDHD, slack deficit. How do I do it disorder?
Well, I do as well, because I missed the memo in Slack about let's do the ugly sweaters. I would have done it. And we have our guest star who's opening up for the very first question for today's Q&A. We have Gail. Hi, Gail. How are you? Let's get you unmuted here.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing okay, and I'm very grateful that you're taking my question. This is wonderful.
Oh, it's good to see you. I knew Gail from, was it McHenry, Chad?
Yeah, all the way back at that Pioneer Center. So that was a long time ago we started.
Many moons ago.
Yeah, my first Chad meeting.
Awesome. All right, Gail. So you have a question about RSD. What is your question?
I can't be medicated even for ADHD. So I already get frustrated every time I hear say, oh, the first thing to do is get medicated. I do have rejection sensitivity disorder. And for me, I will have some really exciting things that I'm involved in life, and I'm rolling along. And then there'll be an episode of something that makes me feel rejected. It can even be something that when I ask around, other people don't see it that way. They don't perceive it like I do. But it's like once I'm hit with that, especially if I can't get it corrected immediately, I just go down that rumination dive. And once I'm in that dive, it really takes me quite a while to get back up. It can actually make me think, oh, who was I to think I could even approach that goal? All those things that people were saying I could do, suddenly I don't believe them. And I don't believe in myself anymore. So I'm trying to find a way to catch myself sooner, get out of it sooner so I can continue on the path towards my goals, keep my momentum going.
All right, so I have a couple questions. Can you describe physically, what does it feel like when you're sort of in that space?
My chest gets all tight and constricted, and I'm in my head. I'm just kind of all in my upper body. Just my thoughts are just, I get lost down a tunnel in my brain. So I'm in my brain and my body's just all tight and constricted.
Do you think you might be doing what's called emotional reasoning, which is a cognitive distortion when we are feeling something, because our brain likes to make sense of things. That's kind of what our brain is there for. And so when we feel a strong feeling, our brain very rapidly will start putting together a story to help us understand what this feeling is all about. So I'm wondering if because I think it's great, by the way, that you did some reality checking with other people to see, hey, like, how are you seeing the situation? That's a really kind of wise thing to do, because you want to see, is this a blind spot? Am I perceiving this correctly? So it's great that you did that. You know, when we are overcome with any strong emotion, no matter kind of what the trigger is, you know, part of the ADHD sort of syndrome, if we want to call it that, we have emotional regulation as one of the core parts of ADHD, which surprisingly actually is not one of the DSM diagnostic criteria. It used to be back in the DSM-3, and the reason they got rid of emotional dysregulation is because around that time, the sort of the behavioral sciences were really trying to say, hey, we're a real science, and science is measurable and emotions are hard to measure. So let's just solve that problem by getting rid of that piece of criteria in the DSM so we don't have to argue that point anymore. But it's always been there, that emotional regulation piece. So whether it's triggered by rejection or depression or something else, right? So if we can really look at the physical sensations of the emotion and get curious about it and sort of pause the meaning making that we're trying to do in that moment, and just really describe a physical sensation, give it texture, give it layers, give it depth, right? And get curious about it. Where does that sensation start? Where does it end? Where's the core of it? Where are the borders of it? And really kind of lean into it like you're observing it versus over-identifying and experiencing it. It allows you to create some space between the triggering event and that physical reaction, so we can kind of make meaning and down regulate. You know, what happens is we get these feelings, and then we get into these sort of cognitive tailspins, and then it becomes this very sort of synergistic effect that it just like then the thoughts are activating the emotional responses, and it kind of continues. So, you know, mindfulness and meditation is a great tool for that. Exercise is a really powerful tool for that. It's interesting when we look at the idea of rejection sensitivity. And, you know, I think it's interesting because there are so many people in the ADHD community who really strongly identify with this label, this identification of rejection sensitivity. We do need more research to empirically say that, yes, this is its own syndrome, this is its own disorder, because that has not yet been proven. And I'm not saying that to invalidate your experience of that. You have a very strong physical reaction when you feel a sense of rejection, right? So the reason I say that is because until we can validate empirically that as a diagnostic label, is only then can we then start looking at what are the treatments and interventions that can best be suited towards that specific diagnostic criteria. It may be in time that we'll see that, but I think if we sort of look at functional impairment and start there, I think that's going to be your sort of best bet by looking at, all right, your brain gets hijacked, the body's feeling these strong emotions. How can I deal with that?
That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm all about behavior changes. So it is a functional thing. And you reminded me of RAIN, RAIN. Tara Brach talks about RAIN. And so if I do something, I suppose maybe what's hard is that when I begin to feel that way, I don't recognize that it's something that I should stop feeling. You know? Because I think if I recognize that, I would go and I would think, okay, go do rain gale, or now you feel like binging, do this meditation. Elijah Goldstein has good stuff, but instead it's like, that just comes to me. It's like, okay, I'm supposed to feel this way. I've been shamed and I should feel shame.
That is a great example of emotional reasoning right there, right? Right now in our coaching communities, we're looking deeply at yearly planning. And in the last several years, I've always done this idea of identifying a theme or word for the year. This year, I've been exploring this idea of having a question for the year. And I'm wondering if there might be a guiding question that you might be able to brainstorm around. Then if you can put that question somewhere physically in your environment to sort of cue you as a question like, is there another reason, or what's another explanation, or what am I feeling? I don't know. I'm sure there's other panelists here who can spitball some ideas. Let's hear from Moira, then Brendan.
Thank you. Hi, Gail. I'm so glad you mentioned that, you kind of find yourself in it before you're aware of it, because my diagnosis was quite late at 45, and most of the people in my family have it. And one of the things that I used to help me was I became aware that if I didn't initially buy into that emotional reaction or those thoughts, if I was able to say to myself, if I give myself some time, I'm going to feel differently about it than if I react right away. Because one of the things that I noticed in myself and my other family members is when a change would happen, that could bring up lots of emotion. Like, I'm already thinking I'm going down this track and now you're changing it. And what am I going to do? But I had a little bit more cognitive flexibility if I didn't do anything at first. And I'm wondering if that is something that you've tried, or if you just find yourself barreling down, like when you said, I feel shame, so therefore that must be the accurate emotion.
Unfortunately, the thing that I do is just immediate, like there's a book called Mindful Path Through Depression with Dr. Siegel, was it? Or when I first read that book, I recognized that's exactly what happens, is that I immediately go into a depression spiral. That's what I had learned so early on, and it's so deeply entrenched in me. So it's an emotional place that I go. I don't take action other than to maybe go and start to eat something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I don't like usually take action and harm any relationship or anything except with myself.
Right. Your internal Hulk smashing.
I often say when I'm feeling a strong emotion that I'm not safe for human consumption. And I just try to isolate myself until the kind of reptilian Hulk brain
we flipped our lid. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you're growing this awareness of the situations that it happens for you. And I like the idea of Eric saying, like, having a question, like a question for me that I'm thinking about for this year is, can it wait? Right. And so having just a small question like that of, maybe, is this true? Or do I need to think about this now? The other piece is doing something with that emotional energy, like Eric was talking about. Sometimes for me, it's something as simple as gardening. It just helps shift my brain. And if I could, sometimes I may need to listen to a podcast at the same time or read a book, because that engages my brain, something so that those thoughts that I'm having don't have the room to grow.
I like that. I like what you both suggested, because I think then the thing is to choose how to do this, where to put something so that I'm going to notice it when I get distressed. Maybe even tell my husband he's good at reminding me of things. I'll say, okay, wait, I'm having these thoughts. And then he can point to, okay, well, you have that list somewhere. And I can have a list of physical choices to make, and I can have a list of questions to ask. And that's kind of like Byron Katie, right? Where she does the work, where you ask all the questions. So that's a good idea for me to have like my toolbox, my RSD toolbox.
There's a lot of good stuff there. And I also want to say, I had to actually look it up because I didn't remember what RAIN stood for. Recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And I think that really speaks to what you're sharing. Brendan, let's get one more thought on this from you, and then let's pick another question. And we will hear you better if you unmute yourself.
Going with the idea of needing a question, maybe a good question would be, what is the story that I'm telling myself? Because that's in here somewhere, right? We oftentimes something happens and we don't know the details and then we make them up, right? Like I'm thinking pretty specifically about some of the students I've worked with and kids where they're like, well, that person hates me. Like, how do you know that person hates you? Well, they came into the classroom and didn't talk to me. Well, maybe, or maybe here's 15 different other reasons why that person might not have talked to you when they came into the classroom, right? Maybe they were anxious about homework. Maybe they had to talk to someone else. And one of the things I work with my clients on is if we're assuming a story, if we're making it up anyway, it may as well be a story that serves us or at least doesn't hurt us.
Oh, I love that. Just like write my own story.
I once heard, I'm trying to remember where I heard this from, this idea of taking what the story you're telling yourself is and creating a sort of sensationalized headline as a way to show sort of the absurdity, in a sense, of the thought, right? So it might be like that the headline, nearby friend hangs up phone too quickly, as a way to show disagreement with idea. Like, so you know what I mean? Like something that's just like, wait, it does. So if you really sort of expand on that, and I think sometimes when we can highlight absurdity, it actually helps our brain go, oh, wait a minute. Like that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's a good one. You're using humor too.
Yes.
That's a good way. Yeah.
Awesome. Gail, thank you so much for your question and for sharing everything that you
Thanks,
did.
everyone.
All right, let's get another question up.
We have a question from Utundi. Tips for finding an ADHD coach for college, doing prerequisites for nursing school and needs someone to report to. Any thoughts?
Yeah, there's an organization that I think is called the Edge Foundation that focuses specifically on coaching college students. There's always our coaching groups, which are full for the winter sessions. Brendan, what are your thoughts on that?
Beyond Booksmart is out there too. I'm not sure if they do college kids or not. I think they might. And then like Chad and Ada, there's plenty of people out there who work with college kids.
Moira?
Yeah, if you have a diagnosis, a lot of the colleges and universities now have a department and you can sometimes get funding for hiring a coach or they have services. So that's worth looking into as well.
Okay. What's our next question?
Actually, let me bring Sedona up,
okay,
and she can ask her question.
All right.
Is it Sedona?
Hi again, Sedona.
Yeah.
Sedona.
I remember Sedona like Madonna.
That was impressive that you were able to recall that. All right. So Sedona, what's your question?
I have started on meds and I'm having trouble unwinding and slowing my brain down at the end of the day. And so I wanted to know what your guys' tips are for some of that.
How long have you been taking meds?
2 weeks now.
So I guess the first thing is give it a few more weeks to see if your body acclimates.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting exercise during the day?
Yes.
Okay. Cardio or weightlifting?
Cardio.
Okay. What time of day are you doing that?
All throughout the day with my job.
Okay. What do you do?
I actually am a program coordinator for Easter Seals for SEL Hourly.
Okay. So you said with your job, so you're
Mm-hmm.
running around doing stuff. Are you actually doing like cardio?
No, not like cardio. I usually am out walking and exercising with clients and things like that.
Okay. So, if there's anything you can do to sort of increase how long your heart rate is at a more of a cardio zone,
Okay.
that may help. How much caffeine are you taking in a day?
Just a cup in the morning.
Okay. What about screen time?
Oh, that could always be better.
Me too. Okay. Do you have any kind of routine for that transition between work and not work?
Usually coming home, walking my dogs, just kind of, slowing down, not thinking about this one or that one just yet.
Okay. And what's the cue for you to start kind of winding down because is the issue kind of getting ready for bed, winding down?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your cue and kind of what's your ramp for landing?
It's usually like after dinner, I get the dogs in their next walk. And then that's like, okay, from now until bedtime is when I'm slowing down even further usually.
Okay. When you're walking your dogs, are you listening to anything?
Sometimes listening to podcasts or music.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed a difference between listening to a podcast and listening to music?
Not yet.
I know when
I'll watch for that.
when my brain is kind of revving on stuff, If I find that I'm like listening to news, like that does not help, right? That usually just kind of it fuels the racing thoughts.
I've had to cut a lot of that down lately, even more than I had before.
Anything else? What about like when you're eating?
Well, with the meds, that my whole eating schedule has been off because then I'm not as hungry.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
I'm still in that adjustment stage, but it's just that, when you get to the point of the night where your brain just starts, it's like all of the things the med held off so I could concentrate suddenly want to all get me right then and there.
Oh, that's a great description.
Yeah.
Have you tried doing a brain dump, like as part of your evening process?
Okay.
Like get all the things out of your head.
I had to do that last night so I could finally get to bed by like midnight because it wasn't working. And then I was just like, you know what? I just got to just dump all this out.
And once you did that, how did that help? Like, I
was finally able to get closer to sleep.
Great.
Yeah.
What time do you think it would be helpful for you to do that if you try to do that more as an intentional practice?
Okay. Probably in that wind down time then in my evenings.
Before or after the last dog walk?
It's a good question. Probably before would be better.
It would be having a nice sort of anchor doing that than doing the thing that you're already doing on a habitual basis.
MJ. Sorry, I'm making notes.
No, that's great. That's great. MJ, what are your thoughts on this?
So nighttime routines are really hard because they just are for whatever reason. And in the coaching groups, we do talk about planning and routines. And there is an exercise where we start with listing all the things that we do in our routine with specific times if we've thought ahead that far. And something that has helped a lot for me is starting with the end in mind. And that can help me work backwards. It doesn't necessarily work for everybody, but for me, that did work. And it's taken me the last year and some to actually come up with a routine where I can set the boundary for myself and say, I need to start at this time so I can get to bed at this time so that my lights are out at this time. Also, for me specifically, coffee makes me sleepy. So I actually have a nighttime coffee. That's my cue to, once that cup is done, the computer's off. Like I have to turn off my computer once that's finished. And I've also added external cues that help me too. So I've added smart lights in this room so that I time them, say if I need to turn off my computer by 10:30, because I want to be in bed by midnight. The lights will start to dim at around 10. If the lights turn off and my computer isn't off yet, that's also a cue that like, oh, I'm going on too long. Like, buddy, your eyes are going to get strained if you are working in the dark. The other thing that I will do as well is if I know that I'm going to be, I don't know that I'm going to be, but I can feel it. Like I feel like I'm going to resist that transition to stop what I'm doing. I will ask for external accountability. If I am not showing a picture that I am shutting off my computer at this time, feel free to bug me about it because I am probably stuck in transition hell because ADHD means transitions are really difficult. So those are just a few things that have helped me out. I hope that helps.
That's great. Moira?
I have a question. The way that you worded your question, it sounded like, is this new for you since starting meds?
Yeah.
So how is it different? Like, is it what you said where the beds work during the day and then it's the end of the day? One of the things that my kid's pediatrician told me is sometimes having troubles going to sleep is the meds wearing off. And for me, I need to be on meds to go to sleep because my brain is so busy. And so I guess I'm wondering, like, are you physically ready to go to bed and you're like lying there and it's just the brain? Because for me too, it was like, I didn't have to work as hard anymore to control my thoughts. So when I wasn't medicated, like you were saying, right? And this is not medical advice. I'm just sharing our experience. My kids used melatonin, and until they started, like me, we started a med that was 24 hours that also helped with sleep initiation, but also not having my medication worn off. And so that would be as part of evaluating your medication is when is your medication? Because mine's wearing off at like 3:00 right now, and that's not enough of the day, right? So that's part of figuring out your meds is not only is it like how you feel on it, but how long does it last, right? Is it too long, too short, too fast? There's those variables as well. Practicing meditation helped me. Like I sometimes when I struggle with it, I count, right? I just try to repeat one number over and over again. Sometimes reading helps me because it corrals my brain enough that it can then relax and go to sleep.
I like using Luna. It's actually a coloring app that tells like bedtime stories while you're using it. So that's one of the ways I'm able to be like, okay, now we're definitely transitioning from this time of the day to this time. And then once I'm done with that, I'm able to usually able to. But again, with trying to adjust to these new beds and figuring out what's happening, that's kind of, I guess, where I'm still at.
I would also encourage you to do some evening or daily symptom tracking, because that's also going to help your prescriber. You know, it can maybe like rank on a scale of 1 to 10, like how active were those thoughts at night and how they prevented you from maybe winding down. All right, Brendan, and then we're going to take a quick break.
I got hooked on that dog walking thing. I'm assuming it's at night. Am I right about that? Like it's dark out.
Yeah.
What if you linger before you go in the house? Like just kind of be outside at night where things are theoretically calm. And
the best part of the walk is listening for my owls.
It's not that if there's trucks driving by, it's not going to be the same experience. But if it's a calmer area, that might be a way to sort of use that already locked in pattern as a way to begin the cue to slow down.
That makes sense.
I like that. Well, I hope that some of those things you try and find them to be helpful.
Definitely. Thank you, guys.
You bet. All right. And, and if it continues, I would say more than a couple of weeks, especially after trying some of these things, definitely talk to your prescriber about that.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. All right. We are going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, we have some more questions for you. So we will be right back. Since 2014, ADHD reWired has been helping people grow through community. And nothing embodies this more than our 10-week intensive coaching and accountability groups with 750 alumni who have gone through one of our 62 groups over the course of 26 seasons. One thing is for certain. We can do hard things, especially when we are in a supportive community. Being misunderstood by others or not understanding ourselves can be so painful. I know this because this was me, and I created ADHD reWired because I don't want people to feel alone, helpless, or hopeless. We do not have to go through life being misunderstood. I know I don't need to tell you that ADHD is real, that its challenges are real, because you live it every day. I just want you to know that you really don't have to face any of this alone. So if you want to learn and grow and take your ADHD management to the next level with a group of amazing people who truly do understand ADHD and the challenges we face, then join us for our next season of coaching and accountability groups. Go to coachingrewired.com and click on the big button at the top of the page and add your name to our spring interest list. And then keep an eye out in your email so you can stay up to date for our upcoming registration events. The dates for our spring sessions will be announced soon. Go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. Support for ADHD reWired comes from members of Adult Study Hall, ADHD reWired's virtual co-working community. It doesn't matter what you need to work on. If you know that you do better when you're working with other people, come try it out at adultstudyhall.com. With real-time accountability, our members have been getting things done that have been sitting on their lists for months or even years. Membership to the Adult Study Hall community is only $19.99 a month, and you can try it risk-free for the first week. So if you don't like it, just cancel it. Your membership will give you access to our on-demand study hall room that we call ASH 24/7 because it really is open to our members 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your membership will also include access to our themed and guided sessions, including a session for writing, a session for job searches led by a coach and HR specialist, and one for tackling all of those projects you're putting off. We also have 2 for exercise and 2 for decluttering and cleaning. We'll have more guided and facilitated sessions coming up soon. Stay up to date with our current and upcoming guided sessions and discover more about our growing virtual co-working community built for adults with ADHD by adults with ADHD. Whether you want real-time accountability in our 24/7 drop-in room or you could use some guided and facilitated support, we have you covered there too. The doors are open at adultstudyhall.com. Come work with us. That's adultstudyhall.com.
And we're back.
That was so well done.
Well, I got into my head. I'm like, oh, what should I say? I should say something creative. Oh, I've been thinking about this too long. Just go for it.
That was probably just the abridged version of all the thoughts that happened in that 3-second period of thinking.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a lot of.
all right. What's the question?
The question is, I see time timers in some of your backgrounds. Can you show us how that works? And this is from Laura.
Okay. I love show and tell on a podcast. All right.
Mhm.
So for all the listeners, I have that sound you hear is me placing the time timer on my desk. So I'm holding it. I'm holding the 12-inch time timer, which is 12 inches. So in the middle, there's this red disc that there's a little like slit that goes kind of behind this. And so it helps you see the passage of time. So right now I have 24 minutes left on this timer. So it's super, super easy to set. You just literally move this and it's continuously going backwards. So right now it's 24 minutes and it will just keep going backwards until it hits 0. There is an optional alarm on the back. I have mine off. And these do come in several different sizes. While I am an affiliate, but I don't have an easy affiliate link to share, unfortunately. But maybe we can get a link to that on the podcast or on the show notes for this episode. And then what other timers we got? Moira, I think, who has the time tracker mini?
I do. I also have mine comes with a little, that's a little thing that I can write like extra time. So if we're doing an hour and 15 minutes, I can do like plus 15 on there. And so it's just a reminder that it's more than that hour. This one, it's the time tracker mini. It's like $13 in the States and like $40 in Canada.
Oh God.
Yeah. So what you do is you set it for the amount. You can't see what time is running down on this one. That's an important thing. But what it does do is you set it for how long you want it to go for, and then you set it for when you want a reminder that your time's running out.
Queue.
Yeah, transition time. So like I actually use this in group because I didn't like cutting people off. This has worked really well. And so they all know that when it's green, we're good to go. 5 minutes before the end of the group, it'll start flashing yellow. And then when the time has run out, it goes red. And you can have it make a sound or not. I've actually used it like when I'm watching TV, things like that for my kids, where you want something that will visual cue you, because the time timer won't necessarily do that unless you're looking at it.
Yeah, and it's just what it looks like. So it kind of looks like a miniature version of like R2-D2. And so it has a little dome on top and these two little dials on the bottom. There is another version of that called the time tracker. So that's the time tracker mini, the time tracker. That one looks sort of like a stoplight. You need the instruction manual every time you need to set it for a different time. Don't get the main one, get the mini. It's way easier to set. And the thing that I like about the mini is that the blinking yellow light stays blinking. On the bigger one, it will blink a couple times and then it goes to solid yellow, which I will then immediately just tune out and becomes part of the wallpaper. Right. So that's the time tracker mini. I got this one. This is the time cube. So it's a cube with 6 sides. The bottom side, if you turn it on, as you just heard. So whatever time is facing up is the time it will automatically be set to. So there's a couple different versions of this. This one it's 15, 30, 60, and 5 minutes. So at the top is 0. So right now it's not set. There's a little like ping pong ball in here. And so there's probably just a little sensor. So if, say, I want a 5-minute timer, I have the 5 that goes up, and then automatically will start the 5-minute timer. So it's just kind of a cool little desk piece it's a super, super easy timer to set. And just, I guess, search for timer cubes.
That might be a good stocking stuffer.
Indeed. Anyone else have a cool timer?
Well, I was just going to mention for the time timer that it does make a slight ticking noise. So if that's something that really bugs you, headphones or just, don't have it in a room where you're going to hear the ticking.
Well, you know what I noticed is that I'll hear the ticking more. And this is actually true because I have a number of clocks, but they're all like silent sweep clocks because the ticking drives me nuts. When the battery starts getting low is when you start hearing the ticking.
Oh, that might be. Yeah, because I've been noticing it in our living room, and it'll be like the kids have gone to bed, and I'll be sitting there like reading, and I'm like, how is it so loud?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Are there any other cool timers that I can?
I use Alexa for timers all the time because it's super easy to set. You just like say the name that triggers the response, and then say set a timer for however long, and that's it.
I have seen also an Alexa clock. And sorry if I
have that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it changes to a timer counting down.
I have to see the visual. Like I have to have some sort of visual where the time just
I use it for when I'm usually for when I'm baking or something. When it's like I want to set it and forget it, that's where I typically use Alexa. Otherwise, I'm using a time timer.
Cool. All right. Well, that was fun. We have another question. We got Carrie.
All right. So I was just looking for some tips maybe on how to help my husband understand sort of what ADHD is and what it isn't. He is a neurotypical. My son and I were recently diagnosed. And I want us to get as much help as we possibly can to start to be able to live more normal lives. But I know that at this point, he doesn't seem to even really want to hear about it because I think in his mind, he thinks it's just, not really a real thing, or it's just a crutch to be able to say it's okay for us to misplace things and stuff like that. And I want to do coaching and I want to do a lot of things, but being that he's the one that does all of our bills, because I would spend way too much impulsivity, right? I know that there's no way I'm going to get that right now.
Okay.
So I need to find some way to get him to understand.
So, well, your question here, Carrie, is about how to get him to understand. But from what you just shared, it sort of sounds like the first question is how do we get him to accept that this is actually a real thing, right? I want to check in with the panelists before I share my thoughts on this. Let's start with Moira.
Thank you. And I can be succinct. Not always, but with this. So I think two things. One, I hope when you and your son were diagnosed that the advice that was given to the entire family was to learn as much as you can about ADHD, because that would be the number one recommendation for any condition, medical condition anyone gets, and that this is a lifelong one. The most succinct way to put this, in my mind, is calling it ADHD. And this is not my words. This is somebody else's. Her name's Megan Ross. And I thought it was pretty amazing when she put it this way, is like calling OCD a hand washing disorder. What it is, it's a dysregulation of dopamine in your brain. All the time, we're trying to have enough stimulation to regulate the amount of dopamine that we have. We either have not enough or we have too much, depending on, but usually it's not enough. And if you have a hormonal cycle, like with ovaries, there's certain times where you are deficient in estrogen, and having estrogen is a precursor to making dopamine. Those are things that are not in your control at all. There are lifestyle things that we can do to make it easier, and there's medical treatment for it. But the number one thing is learning as much as you can as a parent, as a spouse, about ADHD. There's so much we could say about what you've brought up. And I did actually do a podcast about ADHD in girls and women. And it's sort of designed as if you only have someone listen to or read one thing about ADHD, then this is a good place to start.
All right. Barb.
My son was diagnosed fairly young, and my husband, not sure if he's neurotypical, but it's definitely different. He constantly has to move and do things. So it did help to learn about ADHD. And then I was just diagnosed like a year and a half ago. So all I can say is for me, it's been helping to just keep the conversation going. Like when something happens that I know that might have something to do with my executive function, we'll have a discussion. And sometimes I'll even suggest things, you could cue me this way, just to kind of help the understanding.
MJ?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is when I read your question that you said something about it being a personality thing. ADHD is not a personality disorder. Being able to communicate that in a way to have somebody else understand is very difficult. I was lucky enough to have I have an ADHD partner who started pointing things out in me. And I was that person that was very resistant to even considering an ADHD diagnosis for myself. My story was like, oh, I am just lazy. I am just dumb. I am just forgetful. And so rewiring that story for myself, it was difficult enough. Having others understand what it does for me and what it means for me is hard. I want to second what Barb said is, keep that communication open. I know that others have suggested, maybe if they want to listen to this podcast, I know a few other ones on the network too that might be okay to listen to, because it's not just one thing that is affected. And yes, ADHD is a reason, but it's not an excuse. And the only thing that I can say is to keep that communication open. There's also a book there's one about marriage and ADHD. Is that right?
Yeah, Melissa Orlev.
Maybe read that one too and see if there's some good stuff in there, because it's hard. I wish you the best of luck.
Yeah. Brendan?
Thank you. That's a great idea. I'll look for that.
I'm feeling awkward, but I'm just going to.
Because of the question or just in general?
No, because this is a service that I offer, right? And like super granular. I often meet with moms who are down with ADHD existing, who have kids with ADHD, whose dads are not down with ADHD existing for lots and lots of different reasons. And so I'm practiced at that conversation. And one of the things that I find happens that I have an advantage on is that I am a dude. And sometimes dudes are just more willing to hear things from dudes. And if I'm not dude enough, then I mention my martial arts background. Testing for black belt on June 11th. Yay, me.
I saw that.
So
congratulations.
Thank you. So because that's a piece of this, right? That potentially, I don't know for you specifically, but broadly speaking, sometimes that's a piece of it. And sometimes it's because dad has ADHD and doesn't want to admit that he has ADHD, doesn't want that to be the reason for his struggles. And I sucked it up all my life. So how come the rest of the world can't suck it up all their lives?
Like amazingly common.
So, if I'm useful, let me know, I guess is kind of what I'm saying. I've done this so many times.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, I would love to hire you to be my coach,
yeah.
But I can't until he understands that this is actually like a biological thing and not just a personality thing. My son's really, really struggling this year. He just entered 6th grade and we just got him diagnosed, and he's just really, really struggling. And it's just gets harder and harder the more I try to help him. And then his dad's in the background going, don't coddle him like that. You're going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. I think the only other thing I want to add about that is that, it's my heart always really breaks anytime I hear that a family member is, on the I don't believe in ADHD school of thought. Because I think why it's such a heartbreaking thing is because you're there with the person who's really supposed to be loving you like nobody else will. And yet you feel so alone because they're not even open to exploring this as a possibility. So I think that feeling of loneliness when you're actually not alone is one of the most painful kinds of loneliness that there is. So my heart goes out to you, and just give it time. And start with sprinkles instead of the whole cake. Because sometimes that can be more accessible. All right, let's take another quick break. And when we come back, we'll hopefully have time for a few more questions here. So we will be right back. ADHD rewired is not alone. We have more podcasts on the ADHD rewired podcast network, including ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan, Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb, ADHD Diversified with MJ Siemens, and the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle with ADHD rewired coach Moira. You can find all of these shows on the ADHD rewired podcast network by going to ADHDrewired.com/podcast network. And you can join all of us for plus ADHD rewired coach Roxie Martin every second Tuesday of the month on Zoom for a live Q&A. If you want to register to join us on Zoom and ask us your ADHD-related questions, then head on over to ADHD-rewired.com/events. You'll be able to register for our next live Q&A and even get reminders for all of the upcoming Q&As after that. If you find value in this show, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends and family or anyone who you think would benefit from listening. If you really love this show, one way that you can show your support is by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast app that accepts reviews. This really, really does help this podcast get in front of more people. Thank you for listening to the show and all of our shows. And a huge thank you from all of us in the ADHD rewired podcast family for listening. We really hope you know that you are not alone. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our patrons who support us at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. I want to thank our newest patrons, Fraser C., Sean O., Carrie O., and Lisa K. Thank you. And thank you to all of our patrons for supporting this show. If you want to show support for this show because you love the work we are doing, then join our Patreon community at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon, where you could support us at any amount. Perks start at just $5 a month, where you can get ad-free episodes of the show. At $25 a month, you can join me every fourth Tuesday of the month for our patron-only monthly coaching calls. Our next monthly coaching call is on Tuesday, January 25th at 3 p.m. Central. That's January 25th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. I know that many of our patrons give simply because they want to show support for the work that we are doing. And thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of our patrons, old and new, for supporting the show and supporting our mission, growth through community. Consider becoming a patron today if you genuinely love the show. Support can start at any amount with perks starting at just $5 a month. Truly, all of your support is very much appreciated. Join our Patreon community and find all of the perks by going to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks.
And we're back.
Excellent. You're like a pro. All right. Yeah, what's your question?
So awkward. So I was just diagnosed about 2 months ago, and I'm just kind of navigating this new identity and trying to find my community. And I'm so grateful for you guys for doing this and having all of your podcasts, because that's been at my core lately. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. But I guess I'm trying to figure out how to navigate who to tell and how to kind of know who to tell. And yeah, just figuring that out. And because I've had some conversations go surprisingly well, and others not go so well. And I've mostly just told people so far that are either very, very, very close to me or I know have ADHD or think that they might. And so going beyond that has kind of been a struggle, and I've been sort of hurt. And I think I'm normally a very open person and just comfortable being vulnerable. And I'm realizing that I maybe need to be doing less of that. And it's just, I'm curious for those of you who have maybe been diagnosed as an adult or just generally how to handle kind of, being true to yourself while also protecting yourself in family and professional settings.
Okay. Well, welcome to the community. Or actually, welcome to the family, because we're a bunch of neurotypical or neurodiverse weirdos, and I say that with much kindness. Okay, so I will borrow one of my favorite lines from Brene Brown, and that is, "It's not our job to be the asshole whisperer." Right? So if you're sharing with someone and they just don't want to hear it, fuck them. I'm sorry. It's so there's that. So it kind of depends on the nature of that relationship. Obviously, if it's a significant other and you've been with this person for a long time, that's that might be a little bit different. One question to consider is, instead of just saying who do I tell and even how do I tell, but why do I want to tell, right? What is the Like, what am I hoping to gain by telling? Why do I need this person to know? Is it because I need accommodations? Is it because I want to be seen and understood? Is it because I just want to like let my ADHD hang out there and I don't give a shit what other people think? And so I think really getting clarity as to why you're telling someone this information, and then kind of like the so what. All right, so you're telling this person, and so what? What do you want them to do with this information? Why is it important that they have that? What do you want them to do with it?
Yeah.
It really is like this. It's when you're sort of new to this, it's kind of like this constant like coming out as ADHD, right? It's not like this event, right? It's a ongoing process with all the different people that you're interacting with.
Mhm.
MJ, what are your thoughts on this?
Be choosy
Be
with who
choosy.
you tell. I don't know if this is helpful, but if you listen to Kat and Eric's episode about disclosure, it is specific to workplace accommodations. But I think a lot of those tips can apply to just general disclosure. It's episode 399. For me, coming from a community and an ethnic background that really, really, really in general, this is a very overgeneralizing statement that really shames mental health issues, especially in some situations as like a demon or a curse. That's wrong. Yes, be choosy who you tell. And if you do tell somebody that you in the past have trusted a lot and it is met with hostility or just whatever else they have assumed about what ADHD is or what it isn't, that could be kind of an indication of, do I want to continue that conversation? Yes, the communication is so important. The conversation is so important. I am clearly publicly open about my ADHD, but I do not engage in conversations with people who I know are not open to the idea. So yes, it can be out there. Yes, you have the choice of who you decide to tell. And yeah, if it is met with hostility or whatever it is, you don't have to continue the conversation. Like that's your boundary to set. And I hope that when that time comes, that you are able to set that boundary for yourself, because it is hard enough to feel misunderstood. And yes, ADHD is a great explanation for the things that we struggle with. Find your community, find the people that are going to help you and make you feel understood, because
so much.
we're people too.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to do this alone. And yeah, welcome to the circus.
Barb?
Like I said, I was diagnosed like a year and a half ago, and I met with, I have a best friend since, we were 5 years old. And I told her, and she goes, "You didn't know you were ADHD?" I said, "Wow, thanks for letting me know." So that worked out. Some neighbors that I talked to, I just didn't get, the vibe. And it was like, you know what? I'm not even going to go there with them. They're nice neighbors and everything. And then I recently told my 3 sisters when we were all out together. And again, the why was I needed to let them know that the things they don't struggle with, I struggle with. So I just kind of I just let it go. And they're like, "Thank you for telling us." And they were really, wonderful about it. So it helps. They know how to talk to me now when I, whatever it is, party, need to bring something.
Like, don't let Barb bring the appetizers.
Right. Exactly. Because I'm late. Right. Exactly. Things like that. But there was an understanding there, and that was nice. So
awesome. Brendan.
A couple of thoughts. One, if there's a specific person you are thinking about telling, do your homework, right? Like, social media is full of information about people. If it's someone that is posting stuff about anger and these people are trying to get away with stuff and all that kind of thing, maybe they're not going to cotton to ADHD with any degree of kindness, right? On the other hand, if it's someone who's literally posting ADHD memes every month or something, or every day, they're going to be down with it, right? Like, you can kind of judge looking at social media to figure out what someone might think about it. And then the other piece is doing the internal work with yourself around self-compassion, self-forgiveness, self-understanding, self-acceptance, those kinds of things around ADHD and how it affects your life. That can get you to the point where, outside of like a job where they might make your life harder or fire you, you'll care less about who knows and who doesn't, right? I walk around at the vanguard of like, no, I have ADHD. Like, yeah. And as does Eric, right? Eric's perspective of like, too bad for them if they don't like the fact that ADHD exists. And it's because Eric and I both have done all this work to kind of navigate that. And also it helps that we work for ourselves and we're not going to fire ourselves for having ADHD. Like that, I don't want to not pay attention to that component. But the more you are comfortable in your own skin, the less of a big deal it's going to be if you tell someone and they're like, ugh, you're going to be like, man, whatever, and move on.
That's exactly the piece that I need to work on because I'm just not quite there.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It took me a long time.
It's a process.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you guys so much.
You bet. Thanks,
You're
man.
welcome. Thank you for the question.
All right. Let's tackle one more, and then I know we have so many more questions that we're not going to get a chance to answer. But let's get one more here. I know deciding which one is tough. I don't. I'm not jealous for that role, Barb. It's on you.
It's on me, huh? Well, I do find that the one that's at the top interesting. Can you recommend on how to find and utilize a personal assistant for director level tasks effectively? I don't know if we've ever had a question like that. What do you think?
Let's do it. All right.
All right.
All right. So yeah, finish the question.
Are there any personal assistants that understand ADHD and could help keep me accountable? How can this work if I can't give them access to another company's email and messaging system? It's an interesting question. Just anybody who supports you, like without telling them.
Yeah. So I want to kind of broaden the question a little bit to, because that's really, really specific towards for your situation. Finding an assistant to help. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I've learned as, when you sign up for life and the classes you take up, and here's how not to do it because you tried things that didn't work. Thinking that an assistant can read your mind and know what to do without communicating, that doesn't work. I tried that more than once. It took me a couple times to have assistants to realize, oh, I need to have more communication and be more explicit about what I need. So there's that, because I've tried the approach of hiring someone and then just having them sort of sit next to me for, a month to sort of observe what I do. Like that doesn't really work. What does work is documenting all the processes of everything you do that in a way that you can hand it off. It's tedious. It is challenging, but I'll tell you what is more tedious and challenging: having to make another job post, having to do interviews, having to hire, having to fire because you didn't do the due diligence to actually train the person, then how to actually go through the hiring process. Like it is hard to do and to get right, but when you get it right, it can be extraordinarily helpful. You mentioned that you're a director. There are assistants that are sort of different calibers. So there are executive assistants, which may be a little bit different than just an administrative assistant. Now, as far as the not being able to give them access to your email, I'm not sure what the specifics of that are. Brendan?
I obviously don't have any idea what this situation is, but I kind of want to push back a little bit on the idea that you can't give them access to your email, because if you're a director, I'm wondering and thinking outside the box a little bit here, could you maybe get an assistant that you hire that works for the company, as much as like tell the company I need an assistant? They hire them and now they can have access to the emails. Like that seems like a workaround on that specific challenge. When you've got a director position or a director level position, I would think that you could maybe make that kind of a request.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's a government employee, and even if though, that I wonder if there is that question that you had. Can they be hired by the agency? It's an interesting.
Yeah, because it's in the business's interests to help you perform better. And if you can make the case, and this is a case that's easy to make for someone in a director level position without even mentioning ADHD. If you can make the case that you need some support in terms of an assistant, you can probably make that happen and streamline some of these challenges.
Moira?
A couple other suggestions I think if there's been other times in your life where you've had to leave things that are really detailed, like if someone's coming to look after your home or children or animals and all that information that you would really want. I spent a number of years as a substitute teacher, and you walk into a classroom and people have left nothing and you don't even know where to go for a fire drill. So thinking through all the different case scenarios, and as much as you can, like make a recipe book or a how-to book, but also piggybacking on what Brendan was saying, I've got someone helping me with some of my stuff at home, and I'm hoping it's going to turn into an assistant. And one of the things I've done is we created an email that that person can use, and I just asked them to be added to that. So when things get sent out now, they get sent to both of us. So I'm still in the loop, but I'm not responsible for it. And then there's things like the Asana and project boards where you can put tasks on them and you can assign things and you can collaborate. There's definitely lots of ways to try and do it, but it's a job in itself. It will make it harder to go through this process to find somebody. It'll take more time and energy than you want, but the payoff is in once it's working. And that's something to remember, because when you're in the middle of it, you want the help, right? We all want the help, but it takes time and effort to get it there.
Right. And it will definitely require more upfront work in the beginning than less, which is also one of the challenges, because we often wait until we're drowning to hire help. And then it's just to then bring the person on board properly then becomes even harder. So it's one of these things for me, it's taken years of learning, and I still have stuff to learn on this front. Barb can probably attest to that. But I think as long as you are recognizing, hey, I'm doing something, look, I'm hiring someone to help me out. How great is that I'm at that place where I could do that, right? And then know, the first time you're probably not going to do it that great, and that's okay. It's called learning. Right. And so each time you'll get better and better each time. But yeah, no, that's having an assistant is a godsend. I don't know what I would do without Barb. Oh, thanks for the screen hearts, Barb. Okay. I wish I can just pause time and then just keep going, but time doesn't work that way. So I'm going to ask that all of you who we didn't get to answer those questions to, come back next month. We do this every month, and we appreciate you being here and being part of this community. Also, just want to make sure that y'all know Roxie will be back next month. She was taking a self-care day. We now end this with Mr. Curb with a moment of dad. What do you got for us?
To piggyback off my episode on caffeine, I heard you can't solve all of your problems with espresso, but it's worth a shot.
Good one. I like it.
I like it. I like it.
Thumbs up.
Thank you for not making my brain have to think too hard about that one.
Who says magic beans don't exist?
Because there's certain jokes that there's just I don't want to cross that certain line in the sand, where the punchline is. If this is your first episode, you're like, what is he talking about? It's a couple episodes back where Will did a joke that half the people didn't understand. I was on the half that didn't understand it. I had to actually read it to understand it. So I just over-explain that, and that's what we do sometimes.
Do you know what happens when light goes bad? It goes to Prism.
I like that one.
Oh.
That also works with my caffeine episode dad joke, which was, how much does a rainbow weigh? I'm not sure, but it's pretty light.
Oh, there you go.
Nice. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming. This has been a wonderful, well, I don't want to say a wonderful year. It's been a year. It got better towards the end of the year. 2022 is, I think, actually going to feel like a new year, unlike 2021, which just felt like 2020 part 2. So here's to good health, hopefully the wrapping up of a global pandemic, which, by the way, we got through a whole episode and Brendan didn't say anything about it.
It's right.
So I think it's a good sign.
Oh my God, what's wrong with me?
That is a good sign. That means it might be,
Getting better.
Who knows? Thank you, everyone. Moira, Will, MJ, Brendan, Barb, and Roxie, thank you for being a part of this. And everyone who is here, all the listeners, everyone who asked questions, couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHD-rewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD reWired podcast network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD reWired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD reWired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD reWired podcast network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD reWired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD reWired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.